and stuff. Volume is good. Right, nice. I was worried. Okay, I'll turn the music down a little bit. There we go. Right. So, as you can see, I've got a couple of cameras up and running here. Main picture is a GoPro behind a ring light, which you can see in my glasses. Main one is just a laptop camera, but it's kind of like reasonably well lit, so got kind of like controlled lights and stuff. So what we're trying to do here is build a compositor in the browser, because OBS and that kind of stuff is terrible. So the stream that you're seeing at the moment is encoded on a Raspberry Pi 4 using FFmpeg and some legwork. It does tend to crap out for some reason at when it's got lots of motion and lots of complicated audio. When it tries to mix those together, it can only ever have 8 threads because of the ARM architecture. So it's a bit of a balancing act between quality, speed, and kind of basically error suppression. So it does work for the most part, but then I end up with issues where it will suddenly just crap out, and I've got no idea why. It's something to do with the ALSA drivers, and it kind of completely shits the bed. But I'm just not knowledgeable enough about it to do anything other than kind of poke and tweak at different stuff. So anyway, so my problem was that I wanted to stream PSX games in that era, kind of like spooky stuff, but I couldn't use OBS, and it didn't give me enough freedom to do kind of like stylings and stuff, and you have to end up using overlays, which is actually just loading a browser and API shit into a video compositor, and it's just so ponderous and clunky that I decided that I would create a rod for my own back by basically just like writing the stuff that I need to just in basic JavaScript. But of course, this is just doing a capture of an entire screen. So my second screen is connected via HDMI. So it comes out, obviously the laptop goes into the monitor. But on the way to the monitor, I have a HDMI splitter, which I then send one of the signals out to my RPi and a CAP card. And the other goes directly to the screen. But obviously kind of on the way there, there's on this side, there's an entire separate HDMI chain which has multiple inputs, multiple capture cards and things for things like this, and for, I change the source, you'll see that there's an RPi 4 running, another RPi 4 running RetroPie, specifically Playbox. Yeah, so I wanted kind of like better control over things that you could see and do and stuff. So I started writing this thing, and to be honest, like the bare bones of it was written in about 4 hours, and it worked. And it was like it started at midnight until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I finished up the rest of it later in the morning that I got up. But now it's got to a point where it's almost ready, and the two major stumbling blocks are the FFmpeg encoding and the fact that I can't change sources. Now, let me show you what's going on under here. Right, so in the application, and I've already explained this to Matt and Doug when he was on earlier on, but so what I've got going on here is I've got a controller where you can see showing and hiding stuff. That kind of thing. You can kind of like show the float cam, you can remove the decoration, change position, and it's all done relative to the actual kind of view screen. Yeah, it's just going to like some fun stuff like that. Right. Yeah, so we have the camera controls. Now the reason that the camera controls are on that side in this instance is that when I try and feed the camera control ID from here, it's not picked up by this one. And that is obviously an issue, because I would like to be able to switch sources off screen on my main laptop screen so that it doesn't interfere with the compositing side of it. But anyway, so what you'll see here is these are my localhost entries, which are JSON strings, which then get passed into JSON object key pairs, key value pairs, sorry, objects. And you can see them. So, for example, the opacity here, if I select that one, you'll see it change to 1, which then brings it up. So every half second, this compositor is going through its tick and seeing, should I update, should I update, should I update. So this only gets values, and that's why I want to remove this entirely. So this only gets values from off screen. And you'll see that it's localhost 8000 and localhost 8000 controller. They're just running on it's vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS stack. So it's basically two flat websites, and they're only passing data via this shared data pool because they're on the same domain and because I'm the same user. So, I mean, that security is not really an issue when you're doing something like this localhost. But the interesting thing about this is that you can only say you can serve WebRTC video sources to websites that have HTTPS or are localhost. Now, because there's no other stack apart from vanilla.js and the browser standard local storage, it means that you can serve this from GitHub, which means that if you wanted to and you had a cap card, you could just go to the GitHub address, which is /twitching on GitHub. I'll dig it out later. But it means that you can play with this yourself, and if you had a cap card, you could then just go and broadcast directly from that with webcams and whatever else that you needed to do. So it would be like a very low barrier of entry to do this kind of stuff. What else? Yeah, okay, so let's change. So you'll have a look at the cam source and the video source here. So video source being the main background and cam source being the smaller one on the right hand side. Sorry, just a floating video. So we have video source, so we'll change that to my main camera over there. And you saw, hopefully you saw that change. And we'll do the same for the cam source, and you'll see it change to device ID. So, right, so the device ID of the GoPro is this. I don't think I'm pumping it out to console yet, but I can show you what values and stuff we have there. So that's the controller script. This is the main script. Let's just checking if the cam properties has changed. This is something I need to sort out. Cam properties. Let's look at the on change. Start count on change. Let's get the local storage. Actually, we'll do it from the other side because I believe it on access the user. So that's our drop downs. So I've got empty objects, personal objects, which are cam source and video source. So, yeah. And we populate that with this one. Yeah. So what it does, it goes through after it's got devices. And I've got devices is this guy here. So you use media devices, navigator.media devices, which is the WebRTC security protocol API for collecting media objects. So things that can stream or can gather information from the local computer. So we have this inbuilt object here. This is the thing that we're looking for with media devices. there's a inbuilt function called enumerate devices, which doesn't take any values. And then, once it has that, so it's a promise, so it does this asynchronously, then it runs got devices. Got devices is this function here. We're specifying a variable on the instantiation of this function, and then there's a for loop to go through it for the length of the return. You can increment the number, so it adds through that, and then I create a const called device info, which then is is filled and then thrown away every single time it's looped through at this position of the array of device infos, which is this guy here. And I'm basically saying throw away anything that isn't a video input, because I'm not interested in audio, because we're not doing any of the composition there. That's all happening from a USB audio device, which is this tiny little USB dongle here. Is that Amazon Basics? No, it's not. That's the extender. But it's like it's a little €3 device. So anyway, yeah, so, and then we create an option in memory, which is this guy here, and then we fill that option with the label that we get from the device info, and then the value of that object is the device ID. Now, the device ID is what's used to fill, or kind of like fulfill, the promise of loading a device object. So I've gone through this twice, by the way, because it's a const, it can only get used once. So I've got video input that's going to vid source, which is here, and I've got one that's going to cam source here. So that fills both of those arrays, and then on change, all it does on the controller side is stringify that value, because otherwise it puts it directly into local storage without quotes. And if it doesn't have a quote, then it's an invalid local storage entry. So even though you can do it, you shouldn't do it. I would posit to say, unless you're using it for something else, of course. But like in this case, it makes it invalid. So we store those values in video source and cam source, which is here. And this side does it also, so when that's changed, it will also update the cam source and whatnot. So that's the only getter that's on that side. Whereas on this side, we want it to be the setting, all of the setting. But I can't do that with the cameras at the moment. So that's what one of the things I'm trying to work out. Oh yeah, I can just probably show you this actually as well. So you'll see all this kind of crap here. This is the encoding going on at the moment. So we're getting 30 frames per second, just under 3,000 kilobits per second. Ideal for 720p, 720p 30 frames per second according to YouTube and Twitch is 3,000 kilobits per second. But you can see that the encoding is above 1, which means that hopefully we shouldn't get any issues with falling behind and then erroring out. Right, okay, so I'll just put that back over here because that's for a different time. Now, what else was I going to say? The buttons and stuff are dead easy. You can see here that like this is just, I've tried to keep it as simple as possible because I'm stupid and it's just easier for me to follow this way. So all I've done is anything that's clickable has a data attribute, and you can stack data attributes as much as you want because it comes out as a data set. So you can get a single object out on the JavaScript side, which is data set, and it has all of your values kind of like in list, and you can use dot notation to pick them out, which I'll show you in a second. So the easiest one to see is, for example, like an opacity. Okay, so we've got the interstitial again, which is the show hide, gets rid of my ugly face, so we'll do that. And I'll get rid of the camera controls again because we're not going to use them for now. So you'll see that kind of just clicking that and clicking that, you see that we have the opacity changing down here, which is just being passed down and then passed back up every half second, or at least pulled every half second, so it feels almost instantaneous, as close enough to instant as you need it, without being a resource hog. And that button itself consists only of a data element to say what the thing is that you're attaching it to, and what the what the action of that thing is. These values are just they could be anything. They can't be that, right? And then in the script itself, it looks at all of the buttons in the controller, and then that creates an array of objects, HTML elements, and then in that I say, okay, well, let's look at a button in buttons, and then attach a click element to it, and we'll also grab the event. So and then we just prevent the drop. So it basically just stops any bubbling up, and we can just kind of click away at it, and it won't try and do any actions that it normally would do. So here you see this pertaining to button, because we're kind of like in a separate function now. So button is this. So this .dataset.element is, in this case, interstitial, which is just a string. So when we have that, we can say, all right, let's create another object called props, or properties, and that properties is going to be the passed value of the local storage, and then there's a get, there's a get, a set, and a couple of other things as well that you can get in local storage. But like local storage, get the item of element, and we know from previously that that is interstitial. So it's saying, okay, look for interstitial, which is what it's attached to, and then get me the properties of it. And then that's basically created an object from that. So if there are multiple, it will create an object of multiple ones from that, which you can poll individually through dot notation. So here we're saying, okay, so is this dataset action equal to opacity? And you'll notice that that's only a double equation, not double comparison, not a triple comparison, because it wouldn't be the same object, same type of object. So we're just looking for, is it a string of that, and not the same object as that. So we've got this opacity, and then if it exists, that, I think we probably have like an if props, but never mind. If the data action is equal to opacity, then if, now this is obviously a shorthand way of doing anything here, so it's what's it called, ternary expression, but basically this is the same as if props dot opacity is equal to 0, then else do this, right? So in this case it would be, is it equal to 0, then make it 1, if it's not, then make it 0, right? Okay, so that's what that's doing. It's just in a shorthand variant. So truthy, left hand side, falsy, right hand side. There we go, right. And then once it's set that, which is, I remember, like props is just a local property at the moment, so it's not actually writing anything down. So it's created this object, and then it's changed the value. And then once we've done that, we want to then set that back again. So we say to local storage, please set the item of interstitial and stringify, which is kind of like grab all of these JSON elements and turn them into a and turn that into a string, and then pass that back into the local storage, and that's how we're passing stuff into here. And as you can see, it can be quite, you can have multiple properties really, really easily that way. So TopCam container has a vertical position, a horizontal position, and an opacity. And the way that we're reading these things, let's save that. The way that it's reading these things on the other side, here, let's see. Okay, that's just all length stuff. So it's all down the bottom. I made it down. There we go. Right. So here we go. So what we have is, don't read that. That's camera source and video source. So this is probably where I'm having my problems and stuff with the actual changing of the video on the other side. Let's go find some applicable music. I'll tell you what. Let's do some Dempster. Dempster. There we go. Right. Okay, so what this does on this side is I've got an interval here. This is that 500 millisecond interval that I was talking about before. It's set down here, there. Normally I would do something like that because it's faster. It's got like there's something weird about the 300 millisecond range where it just feels like a natural transition between things. There's probably something to do with the way that we see motion, and it's like it probably just over the threshold of things appearing to be moving. So there's something really natural about that. I need to do a little bit of research into the psychology of animation, I think. Anyway, so it's kind of like essentially the reverse of what we've got on the setter side. This is a bit weirder though, because we don't know what we're going to be. On the other side, we can specify exactly what we're setting. On this side, we can't know what we have set, and I don't want to build an object for everything that we set. It's like I don't want to have to do the work twice. So in this case, what we have is a method of enumerating all of the local storage stuff. So basically it says, give me the length of everything that's in local storage. And remember that local storage is specific to a domain. So React uses local storage. Well, in fact, all SPAs use local storage quite a lot because you don't want to be polling kind of stuff out in the cloud. You want to be kind of like, if you don't have it locally and it's not stale, go and get it from local storage rather than getting it from the remote end. And then store it and poll it and do stuff with it there, and then kind of like it's much faster because it's local. And then if anything changes, you can say, okay, like, all right, well, I'll keep that one now that it's been edited, and I'll push the changes only up to the remote end. And then when I need to get all of this stuff back, you can get it that way. We don't have to worry about any of this stuff because this is all local. So what we're doing here is that we're just creating an anonymous set interval function because we don't need to clear it. It's always going to. This is the duty cycle essentially. So if you're into doing system on chip stuff or microcontroller stuff, you'll know what the duty cycle is. Although this is nowhere near kind of like real time and whatnot, but it's like just a utility tick that you just hook into and use stuff from, set values and blah blah blah. So what we're doing here is another loop, another for loop through the local storage. This is the length for local storage. Then do that. Add ++, and that's it. Right. So it will do that every single tick. And just go brrr, brrr. So I guess theoretically, if it got really, 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 really complicated, it could kind of like have major issues or minor issues, I beg your pardon, with performance. But we're never going to get to that because we're only going to have like a dozen things on screen at any one time, and probably be only tracking, I don't know, a couple of hundred if you were really, really kind of pushing it. Anyway, so in the same way that we had down here, in the other side we have an element and a property. In this one we have an element and a property, but we also have an L, right? And the L is the key. So what we're doing is we're grabbing that key, which is the first part over here, so like interstitial cam source, video source, decoration, select, and top cam container. We know, because we wrote the other side and we wrote the HTML, we know that that is the ID of something that's in the DOM. So we could probably check to see if it does exist, but I mean, there's no point in doing that when something is so early on in build. So we get that key, and then we create an element from that key, and we say, have a look at the document, see if there's something in there with this ID, right? So in this case, let's say it's interstitial and this case it's something like div, in fact I know it is, div id fuck it, copy it. Right, I was lucky I got away with it the first time. Right, div id interstitial div, right. And then the properties we know are going to be, make that into a comment so we can see what we're actually doing. Interstitial object opacity, in this case 0. So the things that matter here are the fact that we have the element here, which is a string. Now we know that that's a string. Let's go and get the object. We know that that is going to match that, and then using that same string, because it's going to be the same on the other side as well, grab it from local storage and get me that value. Well, get me any of the values. So theoretically, that could be, that in this case it's opacity 0, but it could be anything. So like it could be like the top cam container, for example. It could have repositioning, position opacity, and all that stuff. So once we have that, that's video source. We're not doing that. That's the difficult one. So I'll get rid of that. I'll get there eventually. Okay, so in this side, I had to do a check to see if the props existed, because it would error out if there wasn't. Okay, so what we did from here is, if the props is opacity, so if it has props, then continue. If it doesn't, then just fail out gracefully. But anyway, so if the props dot opacity exists, so this is like a shorthand for saying, you know, exists, so that would be the same as is true. Right, we don't need to do that, we're just saying does it exist. So if props dot opacity exists, then we're writing that directly. Now this is a weird one, because opacity for some reason doesn't like you updating, or styles don't like being updated kind of instantly, so you have to add a tiny bit of latency for it to transition from one thing to the other. So what we're doing here is like we're removing, this is a shorthand way of removing stuff from the DOM. So what I'll show you it's actually doing in opacity, on interstitial for example, and you'll see that it's got opacity 0 there. Now if I hide that, go to opacity 1, opacity 0. Right. But if I remove, oh, sorry, I'm not going to do it, but like if I removed this, it wouldn't update the DOM. So what this does is element style opacity null doesn't change the value of opacity in the inline style to null, it removes the style. So it's an easy way of getting rid of inline classes and inline styles in DOM elements. So what you do is you kind of like you tell it to go to null, and then you immediately set it again with a new property. So it's like it's a double tap almost, but it happens at exactly the same time. Whereas if you try and change it without doing it to null, it won't change. Now I think that's a bug, but it's been that way for a while, so I guess people are used to doing it that way. Right. And eventually they all work on the same kind of principle. So this one is interstitial image stuff, because the interstitial actually writes it directly. You keep an eye open down here in the stuff. When I change that, you'll see that like he gets the background assets and all this kind of stuff. And then when I clear it, that entire thing's removed. So I'll add that and show it. And that's something that Grimware built for me. And if I clear it, you'll see it animate down to that. And that's just because of a default transition set of parameters that I set earlier, which is this one here, transitional using out 300. Anyway, so let's clear that and we'll hide that again. But you'll see that images does exactly the same thing really. So it's like, does the props image exist? If it does, then set it to whatever the props image is, but we're setting a style here in JavaScript. We could also do class list if we wanted to build classes into the CSS instead. I don't think, that would probably be slightly more performant, but in this case it really doesn't matter. And then if there is nothing set in props image, then just remove it from, which is how we remove it entirely from the object in the DOM. H position, slightly more complicated because what we actually want to do is if we move, for example, right, so the default place is here, top left-hand side for the cam. So you'll see that top cam container in the styles we've got left 50 pixels and we have top 30 pixels, which gives it this position. All other values of this are is that the right place? Yes, it is. Okay, so all other values of this are in CSS. So this is a newish CSS3 width calculator. So rather than doing anything by percentages, you just look at the viewport and say, okay, give me the 100% visual width. And they're really useful. And there's another one which is visual height, of course. And then you can use calc to do absolute positions on it, or absolute kind of calculations on it. So you don't know what this side of it is, but you know that you want it to be the 100% of the screen, but you want it to be minus 260 being the left-hand side offset plus the width of this, which is up here. So you'll see that like 150, that's 210. Yeah, and then another 50 pixels because you want to have the echo of that on the right-hand side when you move it. So you add 100, and then you basically spitball it. You're just going to see, is this what I want? But the nice thing is it all being in CSS, it's very, very easy to fix, and you can quickly screw around with it actually in the DOM inspector and kind of just eyeball it and see how it looks. Right, so what was I saying about that? Right. Right, yeah, so how does this work? Right, so this just like has two more values, right and bottom. So we needed to have the opposite of its top left position. So that's just calculated right and bottom. So what you can do is you can add right and you can add bottom, and that will move it. Add right. And because of the order of specificity in CSS, it will overwrite a class style. So if you have an ID which has a load of classes, which we currently have at the moment, a load of styles, and then if you have if you add a class to that, the stuff that is the classes and the ID is a more specific match than the ID or the class individually, which is why we have top cam container, which is saying kind of like, okay, give me that element, and if it has a dot right, do this style. Now we're moving everything from the left and the top, because otherwise we'd have to have right and bottom and set overrides, and because we don't have right and bottom on the main one, it wouldn't animate. We could have added them, but all of the calculations would have had to been really, really specific, and it's completely unnecessary, because all we're trying to do is move this position here to somewhere else. So what we do is we add a class and we remove a class, and the positions are left, bottom left, which actually just adds bottom in this case, and I'll show you that in a second. Bottom right is the only time that the two other classes are added. So you'll see here class bottom right, and then adds that, and then it overrides the left position there. And the opacity, the default opacity, has obviously been kind of like overwritten as well. It keeps going down because every half second I'm ticking. That's the other one. top. Okay. So next, left will actually reposition it. It will remove the classes. Top left will remove the classes. Yeah. Okay. Bottom left. Yeah, bottom right. Left. I guess that makes sense. Okay. So the way that this is done is we have 3 actions in here. So this is our position stuff here, look. So we have 8 buttons, all connected to top cam container, all have data actions, which I'll get through to in a second, and data directions. Now, data direction is used in exactly the same way that the data action is. We're just using it as a string to describe what's going on. Data action on the diagonal position ones, which is data action deposition, you'll see that the data direction is actually a hyphenated string, and that is useful to us because if we have, let's have a look at those. Right, so here we have our positional stuff. Oops. Let's get it. Oh, trying to be helpful, huh? Right. Here we have values. Right. Here we have H position, obviously for horizontal position, and all it does is say make. So this is something about JSON that you might not know, is that you don't have to create the object before you fill it. So using dot notation, if the parent object, in this case props, exists, so if it was empty, so you can see here actually, look, I'm doing it, so to check, make me a const of props, so make me this kind of like in what do they call it, involatile? No, it's not. Can't remember what it's called. Basically, it's like this protected object. Anyway, you can't specify it directly, but the interesting thing about having an object is that you can fill it now that the object exists. So props, if it doesn't exist, create a blank object or an empty object. Now, when we get down to here, we're kind of doing stuff right. This, we don't need to do a check to see if H position exists because we're actually creating it. So if it doesn't exist, we'll create it. If it does exist, we'll just fill it. So we have H position, which we're getting from the action. So we're just saying, is the data set action of that button H position? If it is, then we will create or fill our local private object of props H position with the direction that came from the button, which is fine in vertical and horizontal because that will only give you top, bottom, left, right. Now, when it comes to the diagonal position, we want to reuse the classes that we already have because otherwise we would have to create specific classes that have all of the same information again, just with different names. So there's no point in doing that, or at least that's inefficient. So the way that we would want to do it is if the action is deposition, which will be diagonal position, then the vertical position is going to be the first half of that hyphenated string, and the other one is going to be the right half, or the second value in that hyphenated string. So we use the inbuilt JavaScript function split, method split, and we just say, give me the first half of that kind of thing. We could actually even do it this way. So let's create like const pos array equals that, and then we could do pos array 0 and pos array 1, which is actually slightly more efficient. So we'll do that. So this, it's the same thing. So rather than doing it twice, we're doing it once and then just kind of collecting it from that local object, local array. And then, as I said before, we just go and fill up our props. Does that get us any closer to doing anything? No, not really. So, but I've been through the entire thing and how simple it is. So you can see that we're actually kind of affecting stuff on one screen there, and this screen over here is affecting it directly, and they're passing stuff down. And you can see that, like, just in 70 lines of code, the controller has the ability to grab hrefs and iterate through them in the same way that we did with the buttons, and it has buttons to do whatever we want to. And all you have to do is fill a bunch of dataset stuff. And if you don't have the dataset functionality you want, you can add it really, really simply yourself. So again, like there's no extra libraries or anything, this kind of stuff. This is all just straight DOM manipulation and vanilla JavaScript. Right. So it's a little bit longer in the actual controller for this because it has to do a load of stuff with the cameras. But I mean, what's that? Like 180 lines of JavaScript there, 70 odd lines of JavaScript here. The styles, 114 lines, and the index, 53 lines. So we have a pseudo controller for web streaming in less than 1,000 lines of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Now, oh yeah, so it's all being served from a Python simple HTTP server, just because I couldn't be bothered to do anything else. It's the easiest, fastest way to just kind of kick something off and get running with it. So our challenges remain. How do we get the camera to update? Now, this is something that I need to read up on, but for some reason, setting it from here and having it picked up from here either refuses to pick it up at all, or it defaults to the wrong camera. So the camera stuff is really quite complicated. So let's have a look at that. As I was going through before, so we've got the promissory media devices, so it enumerates the devices, and then that's a clue to saying that it's all promise-based. Once it has the enumerated devices, then got devices fires, and then we have this variable which is declared on instantiation. Yeah, and then like and we're filling that with the device infos. Or is that inbuilt? It might be inbuilt, actually, thinking about it. Device infos might actually be what one of the classes of got devices is. Anyway, you get device infos, and then like you get all of the. Let's do it here. Several times to update levels between those values. Right. Console.log device infos. There we go. Right. So if I refresh this in the console, we will see, hopefully, absolutely everything. Yeah, there we go. Right, so this is all of the media devices that are available to the browser from my computer. So I have USB audio devices connected, I have... That's still working, right? Yeah, okay. I have USB audio devices, I have 2 HDMI capture devices on USB 3, and obviously have the inbuilt stuff which is on the laptop, which is another microphone, audio output, and webcam. So things add up really, really quickly. And then, you know, if I had a more complicated USB device, then that would it would identify every single input as another device info, which then you could grab information from. So you can see actually in kind, let us change that. Obviously this is dot notation as well, so we could say, let's look at the device info kind, and then it will just be like a whole bunch of audio devices and video devices. And oh, maybe not. Hang on, why not then? Oh yeah, because we're not mapping it. Right, okay, that's why. So you can look at the main object, and then we can say, there we go. Right, so device info I console log. We'll only do it for the first one. We don't need to set up the other one. We'll say kind. Okay. There we go. Right. So the reason it didn't work first is because it was an array, and an array doesn't have a dot kind, but the elements inside it do. So we had to move our query from the top level, where we got the devices, to where we're stepping through the array to look at the devices, or at least to return values to devices. So from here, we've got the option. This is us creating elements in memory and then attaching it to this object here. So that's those, and we're creating the label, or it's option.text. Oh, I see. Yeah. So it's either the label, or if it doesn't have a label, then give me camera I, essentially. So that's interesting. I wouldn't have done it that way. Okay, never mind. Video selector. So, oh, I see. All right. So what it's doing is kind of like, if it doesn't have a label, it'll say camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4, whatever. But it will do it from the length of the video select object. And as that is stepping through, that length grows by 1 every single time. So you're saying kind of like give you the length of it and then add 1, because that's where it's going to be. Plus, you don't want to start on 0, because only programmers know how to do counting from 0. Right, so that would be camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, blah, blah, blah. Then we append that option there. So obviously we're only interested in video input, so I've got it here filtering out if device kind is video input, then give me that. And we do it again for the cam select, because we have consts. As I said earlier on, you can only use them once. Select for each. Yeah, so everything that's in selects. Now I didn't write this one, so this is a bit weird to me. So array prototype slice call select. So that's looking for select. So that's here. So everything in where is select is created. Okay, select is for each. Right. So selectors for each. Select and selector index. Sorry, selector index is just an I that's been called something different. So we're looking at all of the select objects in one of the select tools, and then inside of that, array prototype slice.call select child nodes. So that's an inbuilt DOM query. So give me everything that's a child of that. I don't know what .sum does though. Look at that. Let's learn something together. Okay, so the MDN, what does it tell us? The sum method tests whether at least one element in the array passes the test implemented by the provided function. It returns, oh, so it's a true or false. A true or false. Okay, we'll keep that open and we'll come back and look at that in a second. So the demo of that, okay, so the demo is in an array of 1 to 5, is one of them modulo 2. So if at least one of them fulfills that query, then it returns true. That's useful. Did not know that. Okay, so in that controller, so if anything in those child nodes value is equal to 1 to whatever the length is, then the select value select.value being this thing here with the name in it is the value selector index, which would be a number. I don't really understand why. Okay, hang on a second. I'm presuming that. Come on, MDN, what you got? The slice method returns a shallow copy of a portion of an array into a new array object selected from. Right. Okay. So an interesting thing about arrays in JavaScript is that everything is edit in place. So when you do a sort, for example, even if you specify, so if you had, because it's to do with everything like it's by reference. So if you had an array of 1 to 5, for example, and then you said new array equals array, and that array would be the first one, which is the 1 to 5, you're not actually creating a new array, you are actually just passing that reference from new array to array. So when you do like an array sort on new array, that's actually happening on the original array, which can really screw with you if you're kind of trying to do comparisons and things like that, or if you want to kind of see if something's moved or is a different length and all this kind of shit. So it's really worth remembering. Okay, so a shallow copy of a portion of an array. Okay, so slice 2. So slice happens at the value. So position 2, slice me that. Or it's got a beginning and end. All right, it's interesting. Right, so you can give it one value or two values, and then it will give you the beginning. So that's the beginning. So that theoretically would be kind of like end to infinity, and that one there is just like an end to x. Okay. And that's the whole thing. No, it's not quite the whole thing because it starts at 0. Right. So give me everything 1 to 5. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Interesting. We're learning stuff. Team, well done. So, next up, what are we doing? Right. Okay, so it's another thing. It's the end of the promise here. It's like once we've done that. So the end of the promise is basically if there's an error, then send it out to handle error, and handle error is actually this thing here, which is a catch-all function for all errors, so that it doesn't. So it doesn't just kind of clog up your console or stop working in this case, because it will just log out the error instead. Okay, so got stream and got cam. Got streams the original. So this is all based upon a working example from the WebRTC GitHub from 2017, I think. So it's been around long enough that this is actually kind of like ratified, but it's still annoying enough that they've made it very hard to use webcams. It used to be much easier. So basically, got stream. Why are we doing that? Hang on a second. We don't call that there because it's not. You've got cam. Bear with me. Okay. Is anybody still in the chat, or am I just talking to myself now? No, Matt's still there. Okay, good. Right. All right, Matt. Okay, so what I was saying was, now GotStream, it's kind of a little bit out of order, but GotCam and GotStream are two identical almost, but distinct functions, one for the camera and one for the video background source. But we don't call these immediately. We have start cam and start vid. We're going to start video. Now, you'll see that they have the navigator media devices, get user media, and then the constraints, which is this constant here. And then it goes, once the promise of that is fulfilled, then it goes and gets the stream. And then it says that it got the device, and then if there's an error, go and do that. So we have a promissory chain here. So we say, like, do this thing here with those values, and then once that is complete, do that, and then once that is complete, do that. So we have like rather than having functions which are kind of like reliant on each other, and you would nest functions, a very old-fashioned way of doing stuff. Now you would have a promissory set of values. It's like asynchronous. So rather than having to write something to wait for it, it's already built in. So we do call these on the page load, which is why everything comes up straight away. So you'll see the start video and start cam on load. So we've actually kind of wrapped this entire thing on a window event list at load. So once that's done, then go through the steps of here. So we're not waiting for anything. So it starts the video, and then once it starts the video, if there's already a stream, sorry, I beg your pardon, if window, the whole object, stream, and we can do console.log/stream, and we can have a look at the values of that. Can we not look at the values of that? Start video happened. Apparently not. I thought we could. We can look at window, right? I'll tell you what. No, let's not do that. Let's see why we can't get that. Okay, ping, great. Let's have a look at everything in window. Right. Now, because there's a lot that you can do with window, it's like it's got tons and tons of options and properties. Right, so application cashback. It's a really useful way actually, and if you wanted to kind of like learn the inner workings of, sorry Matt. So if you wanted to learn the properties of a JavaScript object or kind of the JavaScript window, for example. Hello Viva, this is me doing some live coding. Yeah, the whole game's like this. I see. Yeah, so if you wanted to learn the kind of the properties of a JavaScript object or a window object or something, a good way of doing it is to just open the console and either type the object or build the JavaScript that consoles it out. So in this case, we're doing the whole window. So that's too much. We don't care about that. We could scroll down to it and find stream, which is there, and you'll see that it's like media stream, and then it gives you, so it's active. It's got an ID of this, and then we have on active, on add track, on inactive, on remove track. So these are kind of life cycle events. So you could append something like an alert window, for example. You'd say kind of like on stream, going live, pop, and you'd actually get it to come up. Or you could say the next step on from that would be adding the track, and that would be what happens here. You could have an event that says kind of like a window.stream on active, on add track, adding video track, and then give the ID or something. On inactive, you could look at the fact that like maybe it's dropped out, and you can say there's no video feed coming in. On remove track is obviously you would probably want to have a report that says something like track successfully removed. So it's just like life cycle stuff. But there's just too much information there. So what we need to do is we need to look at just window.stream. Okay. So let's refresh that. Okay. And then we'll remove the camera controls for now because it's something else. It's undefined. That's interesting. So why is that undefined? So start video. Oh, hang on a second. I'll tell you what. How does it happen? Get tracks for each track. Stop track. So this kills anything that's playing. So that doesn't exist yet because it hasn't instantiated the first time. This gets the video source, which doesn't work properly, but it will do it from video select value. Maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe the way to do it is not via the direct reading of the application. Maybe it's setting the value to selected in this drop down in the select option. Oh, I'd rather do it without that though, because that feels hacky. Okay. Anyway, right, so the reason that so that's only looking for something if it exists. So if it does exist, then kill it. But it doesn't to begin with. That is only when you reselect a source and then it starts playing. So here we have set item video source. Yeah, that's me actually kind of like writing it back in once we've made a new selection. Probably shouldn't be there. In fact, I know it shouldn't be there, so we'll comment that out. That could be part of my problem, because if it fails, sometimes it adds the wrong camera. Right, so the constraints here are, it's just an object, a JSON object which has been created. And that JSON object has video device ID, which we're getting from the cam source select, or from the JSON object in local storage. And then we're saying, if it's exactly that, then make the source that, and then at that point send that to .cam, and then once we have that, we've got the device, we catch and blah, blah. Right, okay. Yeah, okay. This is checking to see, this is checking to see if something's changed. So we didn't want the camera to constantly be changing its source, because that would actually add, every half a second, that would probably add a lot of very, very annoying flicker. Because there is a black screen between, there is maybe like a second, or maybe less than half a second in fact. But there is a black screen when you detach the previous source and attach the new source. And of course we didn't want that to happen every half second or less. So what we do is, if you're used to stateful programming, there's a state machine. Where's that here? Oh, I see, it's behind the thing. Right. So if you're used to doing like state machine stuff, you're kind of like, is this true? Then kind of like do this thing. You do it a lot with microcontroller programming. Whenever you've just got a loop, and all you're really doing is like you're looking for now, and you're looking for a previous value, and then that's all you've got. So everything is happening kind of as it happens. So all you're really doing is looking for a value now and looking for the current value and the stored value. Sorry, you compare the two, and then you change whatever it is that you need to do, and then you change the stored value to the current value, because then it never has to do another check until something changes. So that's what we're doing here. So the previous cam source and the previous video source are being set by, on load, they're being set by, so this only happens once on the page load. Goes away, grabs the local storage cam source and video source, takes that ID, fills it, and then uploads it, and then starts the camera. This works. This is great, because otherwise we would have to reset it every single time we load the page. Hang on a second, someone's being snarky in Right, so that's setting our video cameras. Right, okay, so that's our interval, blah, blah, blah. And the commented out stuff here, as you'll see, is that we're creating so our element is this, as we've been through this already with the local storage and the keys and things. This is how we kind of do our selection. So we're saying that kind of like, is the left-hand side of this local storage equal to video source? If it is, then go and get that video source. And as long as, and if that video source on the right-hand side, which is the ID, is not equal to the previous video source, then we'll set the previous video source as our new we'll set the previous video source as our new value, and then go and do the thing. Right? And actually, that should be a function, not the string that it's referring to. Now, in fact, I can probably show you what was going on in the first place here. Yeah, we shouldn't be setting the item at that point, because cam source is incorrect. Okay, so now if I change the value here, for example, of that one. Yeah, so this is our issue. What it's actually doing is, although that ID is correct, it is not loading the correct. So let's change this one, for example, to that. You'll see it will just load up that, and that's not correct. We know that that's not correct. That should be game. That should be my FaceTime at the front. So there we go. So CamTwist is a third-party application I was using for doing, basically for fucking around with people's Zoom meetings and chats and things like that. So let's have a look at the camera controls and get them back. So no, wrong one. Right, so that's fine. Let's use that. Hi. Game cam? No, here we go, that's side cam. Right, so our problem remains that despite setting the right ID, it never loads the right camera. So that does cause an issue. So it would be really, really nice to be able to set all of this stuff off screen. But I'm not entirely sure what to do. So let's read through it. For a start, let's work out why I was setting the local storage after that const. So video source is either the value of the selected object. Hang on a second. All right, hopefully I'm back now. So, let's turn off the blood bars, we don't need those for now. So, it is setting the ID correctly, but it is not. So what's video element? What do you think video element is? I've forgotten already. I wrote all this. Okay, yes. So video element is video 1, which is this guy, and video 2 is this guy. And then video select, yeah, okay, is the select with an ID of video source. Ooh. Okay, and our selectors are those two things. Okay, so this is an array of 2 HTML, it's what they're known as a HTML collection. So it's an array of 2 HTML collections, and then we're looking inside that for selected, I guess. Let's have a look at that properly. So video select value equals video source. Do you know what? I think that probably is it. So I think by default, either the first element of an array, of a select object is selected if it's not already specified, or it's null. So maybe it's null or undefined. So let's have a look. So let's have that console open. So line 79, select value is not filled, but as soon as I change that value, so as soon as I change that value, it will give us the ID. Okay. So now we know that the load works, so why wouldn't the loading from the okay. Now this sucks, but I'll do that because then that should see if there's a difference between the two values. It could be that it just doesn't match the ID. Oh, what have I done? What have I done? Oh, I see. So 1, 2, few, closing parentheses. It's like Lisp sometimes. Right, so that's my value. Yeah, it loaded. Now if I change one of these, let's see, we'll go back to FaceTime. Okay, now they are identical. They are identical. And I can prove that. Let's see, right. If video source select value is equal to and of the same type as this, then console.log, they are the same. Else console.log, log, they are not the same. Sadface.jpg. Okay, so now the first time I'll get the sadface.jpg because the select is empty. The next, and we have to go away, and then we'll get the sad face again. And then I go back to FaceTime. They are the same. So they're identical in every way. So it is not a parity problem or a type problem. Now, JavaScript obviously does have a problem with types. Some people see it as a weakness, other people revel in the chaos. Now, one way to do it would be to look at the value inside the JSON, then set the select that matches that value as active. But ideally, I would like to remove the select part from the process. So let's see. It feels wrong, but let's give it a go. So we don't want to be able to do stuff on select here anyway. So I'm just gonna do that and that. So that means that it'll either be blank or it will load So the first time will load up okay. hello. Now, if I change this, this will not work. It won't do anything. It will just load the same camera again. Yeah, okay. Because it's not passing a new value, it's actually keeping the old value, and then so it's using that kill window.stream stop track, and then it reinstantiates the track with the value that we pass it, which in this case is the value from JSON. So let's go back to the application because we don't need to see the console. Right, so video source, just want to prove not updating when we change the value, even though the onSelect function is doing its function, it's just not setting the value because we just turned it off. Now, that should mean, I mean it doesn't, but when we change this, oh. Well, I never, that works. So actually changing it from the select, so it was that all value. So now we have to define our default cameras off screen, which actually is exactly what I was looking for. Huh, that's interesting. Okay, so that means that we can actually, remove that from the main viewport. That's a good sign, because obviously the best code is no code. So the more we can remove and still get the same effect, the better. So what I will do now in the cleaning up parts of this stream is get rid of those consoles. Let's go up to, or down to get cam. There we go, remove that. We will remove that. Cam select on change, we'll remove that. Does that only happen once? No, that's cam select, okay, so there's vid select as well, which is above that. There we go, right. So we can remove that. We can also remove all of these, because we are not iterating through them. Select as, hang on a second. We haven't got devices. Okay, so we can't quite just delete everything. Because we need to be able to step through. Okay. So that's mapping the select values. Does this actually do anything? Does it do anything? So this is just a pending for use. That's nice. But it says got devices, right? So function got devices, device info. Oh, I see. Okay, so it enumerates the devices and then it says got devices, but we're actually not using that anyway. So I think we're safe to do that. And how was that? Okay, this is a bit of a risk, but we're not using those anymore. Yes, we are. We're not. Where else is video select? There's only two. Okay, so yeah, okay. So I think we are good to remove those. Chat, wish me luck. Okay. Oh, there's an error, but what is it? Got devices is not defined. Well, I told you to get rid of got devices, you arsehole. Right, that's line 58. Line 58. Oh, okay, yeah, right. No, get lost. Got devices. No. Oh, right, 82. No, just them. In fact, that's an extra them I don't think we need. Right, so that promissory thing would just stop because it doesn't go anywhere else. So that. Quickly check. Okay, good. Right. Okay, right. Next is to go into the index and our video controls. No, that's the wrong index. We want to go to the other one. In my files, at that root, and then video select. And then in the CSS, select. Okay. So, and that also means here, hang on, in the controller, style.css. Oh, I haven't done anything to it yet. Right, okay. We can get rid of camera controls, refresh that. Okay, oh yeah, right, because at the bottom of this file, we're actually doing a check for camera controls, I think. Oh no, we're not. I'll tell you what it is. It's because in application, we still have that. Nope. Okay. 113. What's that doing? Cannot read property style of null. Which is it trying to do? Interstitial cam source, video source, decoration, top cam container. That's interesting. should not be reading anything at all. Still, I mean, that's something I can fix off screen. But anyway, thanks very much for joining me. That's actually got us very close to doing exactly what I wanted to do, even though it was a surprising result. But I hope that some of that was enjoyable, at least. But anyway, we're kind of like dog fooding our way to a full overlay. I guess the next thing to do would be to add some basic effects and stuff. I'll look into interaction next time, I think. I think it might be quite nice to, if I can, connect to an external API and trigger events locally so that chat can have some stuff to play with. But I'll think on it. But for now, thank you very much, and I shall see you when I see you next. I don't think it'll be a regular thing, it will just be a thing. Yeah. I'll have a think. But anyway, thanks very much for joining me, and I shall see you anon. Let me just full screen. Oh no, I can't. I've broken it. Never mind. I'll just quit the stream, and I'll see you guys later. Tatty.